having a conversation yesterday with my 17-year-old and her cousin. They're the same age, and they quickly, reference that movie called Mean Girls. And this is sort of a standard of acceptance. Like, this is how you can act, and this is how you should act, and they will, identify someone in their circle that would be similar to a character in this movie. And why is that? And so I think, again, we need to change how we view each other, how we communicate with each other, support each other more. And it does start here with each of us that are here. We've come here for a reason. We're passionate about this topic. So each of us can start this change of influence and impact. So I'm excited to see us stay in touch, connect with each other, thank each other for being here and supporting each other, and how we're going to move the needle forward within our own area of interest. Thank you, Megan, for that comment. I would like to now introduce Dr. Tanesha. Dr. Tanesha House. She is the Commerce Chief Gender Officer of the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce. She is also on the U.S. African Business Council and a transformational leader based in Chicago. Dr. House is a results-driven entrepreneurial leader with distinctive composition of more than 15 years of experience. Her skilled and diplomatic interpersonal traits allows Dr. House to be an excellent communicator and have the uncanny ability to relate and work effectively with diverse professionals and constituents. I would like to welcome Dr. Tanesha and hear her commentary on this topic.
Well, thank you very much, Nova. I appreciate the opportunity, and greetings, everyone. As was mentioned, I am also a chief, I shouldn't say chief, but I am a staunch advocate for community. So not only being the chief gender officer for the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce, USA, but I really enjoy being actively engaged in the community, as demonstrated by my most current work in Chicago on the West Side. But I do want to make certain that I say to you that it's a pleasure for me to join you on this topic of gender equality, because it is an area that I highly regard, have extensively explored, and passionately advocated for over the past decade. And congrats to you, Loretta Green Williams, the PAC team, and all the volunteers who assisted with organizing this platform with a very diverse representation of esteemed contributors that will contribute their thoughts for the remainder of the day, and those that have already shared, much appreciated. We have a lot of overlapping ideas and thoughts and solutions for making certain that we can reach gender equality, equity, and parity in many respects. And so I do want to say thank you to those who are also attending today as well, because we do know that people have many demands for their time. On a prior platform, I had the privilege of co-authoring a book with female leaders across the United States, and we wrote about gender equality. The book is entitled Cracking the Wall 20 Years Later, Women in Higher Education. The original book was written in 1993 and was republished in 2013 with some of the very same authors who updated their original chapters, sharing their experiences as a female transformational leader. After having conducted substantial research, intense planning and design, and implementation of an accredited master's degree program with a team of women instructional designers and advisors at a liberal arts college, I was asked to contribute as one of the new voices for Cracking the Wall 20 years later. Just in case you're interested and you're piqued, then I will go ahead and add the link to where you can find the book in the chat. The book itself, Cracking the Wall 20 Years Later, it affirms that gender equality is an age-old issue that is exacerbated when the race is factored into the equation. Unfortunately, the issue areas of women being excluded from leadership opportunities, the pay gap, etc., have not significantly changed on a worldwide basis. The issues are seemingly growing older and becoming even more complex. Nevertheless, as an optimistic realist, I remain encouraged that there is still hope for gender equality and parity in a variety of areas. Needless to say, as a Black woman, I am equally hopeful for racial equality and equity for all races, but even more compelled concerning Africans and Africans of the diaspora. For this reason, and this reason alone, I became interested in the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce. As stated by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, women's full participation in the global economy is critical to addressing the key issues of our time. This statement might suggest that women's full participation, quote unquote, consists of being more equally and equitably involved in global business opportunities, including trade, procurement, government, boardrooms, and commissions. Since full participation is noted, the composition of the aforementioned areas must be comprised of a more diverse representation of women, not only white women and white males. As part of the Biden-Harris administration, the executive leadership plan includes gender equality and empowering women as critical tenets to be upheld nationally and internationally. Because of this, the Build Back Better mantra encompasses the need to address the effects of the pandemic while keeping women's empowerment top of mind as part of global economic recovery. In addressing gender inequality as a pressing moral, social, and economic issue, we must acknowledge the challenges and areas of opportunity pre, during, and post-COVID-19. All the while, it is imperative that we all implore immediate action toward the viable opportunities proposed to remedy the issue areas. As the panel so eloquently outlined, COVID-19 has caused a myriad of disruptions. Women overall had to combat professional and personal issues, including isolation, domestic violence, no income, job loss, forced closures, lack of access to capital, supply chain gaps, loss of human resources, digital deprivation, and mental health that conflicted with managing their household and operating their small businesses. Though the issue areas delineated are not an exhaustive listing, the outline that I'm about to share descriptively identifies a few that are very prevalent, beginning with isolation. There were many women who suffered from not being able to personally engage with business colleagues, suppliers, clients, associates, friends, and family, etc. Even with online accessibility, in some regard, the lack of social connectivity seemed to create feelings of being aloof or disconnected from the world. Domestic violence, this area many people shy away from or see as taboo and they don't want to touch it. But a plethora of sources have reported that domestic violence continued to be prevalent, even more heightened in households as women were more readily accessible to a spouse or significant other who has proclivities for physical, mental, and or emotional abuse. No income or job loss. Thirdly, not being able to fully operate as a business due to loss of contracts and customers, and as a result, little to no revenue generated. Many families increase an opportunity for being susceptible to pantries or community resources that were provided and may have suffered from hunger or even homelessness. Also, some business owners who worked a full-time job in order to have more money and a steady income as well as benefits, they were doing so to help sustain their small business. And I will share with you a story in our community where there's a local small business owner, a young Black woman of a retail outfit. She has a business that is about hair care. And you know, it's a very large industry, $1 billion industry. And unfortunately, she had to make a very difficult business decision to return to the workforce in order to increase her access to capital because of her inability to gain immediate cash infusion when she needed to make some purchases. They needed to keep the store stocked with products, but didn't have enough sales of all products on their shelves to allow for high volume purchasing of most frequently sold items. So they sought assistance from local small business development organizations, but they did not have an alternative plan to implement the additional income generation. As such, they felt compelled to become an employee in a high wage paying profession in order to amass cash for a period of time. This story is not an anomaly, and we know that there are so many women who experience situations like this, as has been shared by prior panelists. Also, forced temporary closures due to shelter-in-place mandates for entities deemed as non-essential businesses caused significant unrest for women business owners. Some of these temporary closures resulted in permanent closures because the business owners did not have the capital that they needed to sustain the cost for rent, mortgage, or for the business locale, as well as other fixed expenses. And there are many more, but one I want to highlight also, or two more I want to highlight just for the sake of time. Supply chain management gaps. This is huge because many of the small business owners had to deal with inflated cost of goods. Because of the pandemic restrictions, depending on where the goods were sourced from, there were delays in shipment and or discontinuance of products entirely, which impacted not only face-to-face sales, but online as well. The digital divide is an area of opportunity as well that we face in the community, especially for small businesses in areas that are primarily Black and Brown. Those inequities include the inability to access the internet and, of course, affordability of the internet, and also the bandwidth that is lacking because speed is limited. And of all the issue areas that directly correlate with what I've just mapped out, I want to draw attention to mental health. Because women tend to be caretakers, that is taking care of everyone and oftentimes neglecting themselves, mental wellness during this time and even prior to were further compromised. So for the business owner, mental wellness is paramount as they are responsible for ensuring sound business decisions that they're making, and also being able to be open to innovation and being able to connect with other types of access to capital, as was referenced earlier by our panelists. As such, access to this type of healthcare is vital. Mental wellness is vital, whether it's face-to-face and or utilized via telehealth. However, the small businesses with limited benefits and access to capital, the fees for such health support can be cost prohibitive. On the subject of opportunity, if the study conducted by McKinsey most accurately reflects the potentiality to close gender gaps by 2025, thereby increasing the GDP by 28 trillion annually, the question begs, why isn't there more of a concerted effort by men and women to achieve gender parity? With this in mind, it is important to draw attention to the fact that there are notable possibilities for women-owned businesses to be seriously considered for substantive global business agreements that can assist them with establishing, scaling, growing, and advancing sustainable business models. For the small business owner, this could include a diversified business framework that encompasses various modalities for the services and or products they provide to consumers, B2C, government, B2G, businesses, B2B, including geographic service areas. As part of this model, it would be necessary to assist small business owners with engaging partnerships, mentorships, and sponsorships to construct the necessary relationships designed to facilitate viable procurement opportunities worldwide. And also partnerships as part of the Sustainable Development Goals through the UN, that would be paramount to include as part of the process of creating procurement opportunities. Relationships with consumers, business, and government entities is a vital proponent to the life cycle of the businesses, especially for women and women of color. To that end, large corporations that have openly expressed interest in combating racial injustice via support of Black-owned businesses can do so by making an impactful commitment by way of consistent procurement opportunities for Black women-owned businesses. In other words, put their money where their words are. Words indeed. That is to say, make a meaningful investment in women-owned businesses that are in dire need of an economic stimulus because it is a moral, social, and economic imperative. An interesting means of direct measure would be to review private businesses' social responsibility claims by evaluating their financial statements, particularly the accounts payable line items, accounting for cash paid to vendors. If the large business entity is truly espousing their social responsibility values, then their monthly cash spent on vendors will be indicative of a diverse, racially and women-led small businesses. At the end of the day, in order to achieve gender equality and equity, we all have to hold each other accountable. On a similar related note, it is important to mention that leaders of the companies must pay close attention to the equitable treatment of women employees, especially those led by women, as even referenced by our most recent panelists. In a study conducted by Gallup, researchers highlight in ways which businesses can create the ideal work culture for female employees. This study references how in the US, more than 5 million jobs are available, but women continue to drop out of the workforce in troubling numbers. Far less than half of female employees, 35%, are engaged in their jobs, and nearly half of women say they're looking for or considering new jobs. Organizations have to create cultures that enable women to maximize their full potential in and outside of the workplace. Organizations that continue to enforce outdated policies will not be able to keep up with employers who offer more choice and flexibility and greater trust and transparency. To attract, retain, and engage a modern workforce, business leaders must be courageous and begin to examine, if not overhaul, their organizational policies, strategies, cultures, and values. Gallup also notes that too many US organizations in particular continue to follow policies created in the 1990s, if not the 1950s, or they change their policies but not their culture. With that being said, post-COVID-19, one of the many goals for women-owned or led organizations is to ensure There is an organizational climate of equality and equity for women and men, but especially women of color. An emphasis is placed on women because, much like many men-owned businesses, women who own or lead a business are not always prominent of women and are not always prominent of women or a proponent of women in the advancement as demonstrated by action rather than their words. As women, we must too walk the walk while talking the talk and keeping top of mind that gender equity and equality is an economic imperative.